Charlie Kim is here, so I'm going to bring Charlie Kim on. And hello, Charlie.
But I could
Okay.
just go over the thing right with my current positions with the U.S. Department of State as the Fulbright Specialist Ambassador, and also my position with the uh, Association of Foreign Intelligence Officers. I'm the President pro temp of the Great Lakes region, which encompasses the Midwest region. So I have information about our particular subject. I will be able to speak about things that seem to be unclassified, but classified information I would have to hold back. So I am able to give you as much as possible, but if I can't answer, I will state that that might be information that should be sought in a different source.
Now, uh, let's go. I've been running some videos about Iran, and let's go back to how Iran used to be before the Shah of Iran was uh, taken out of the position. Why the people wanted a change and got rid of Shah.
Well, as you know, their particular independence came with the Islamic Revolution, and that was done by the current leader. His father just passed away, as you know, during the attack that was recent, and he was injured. Mabas Hassani Khomeini, who is 56, I believe, at the current time. And his father, who was Ali Khomeini, has passed away. And his person who's part of his family and original line, Rohella Khomeini, is the one who founded the IRGC, which is the Islamic Revolution Guard Corps. And they're the ones who seem to be pretty much controlling the country at this point. And this is why it's very important to understand this history. And Iran has a history that goes back from 600 BC. So they're a country that's existed at least about over 200 and, 2000, I'm sorry, 2000 and about to a point of 500 years. So 2,500 years or more, they have this history of a culture that's very strong in the Muslim faith. And there's different Muslims, you have to understand, because I have friends who are Iranian and they have different views. And as you may know, about 90% of their particular population have a Muslim background, with the Shias and the Sunnis have the differences, but still they have the culture that differs from Christianity and Judaism. And that's one of the things people need to understand, that they had the decree in 1979, however it was implemented, to give them the rights to practice this Islamic theology around 1980, because of this leader of Raul Khomeini. He had pretty much taken over the country with his force of the Islamic Revolution. And this is why their culture is very deep. It's not something that just could be dismissed in a few weeks or a few years. And this is why I also believe that even though we are taking action and Iran is a threat to the United States and Israel, it seems that a lot of people think this will be pretty much dismissed in a few weeks, which I believe different because of certain information that I have and people who are already working on these issues. And our particular area for the Association of Former Intelligence Officers, there's people who are still in the area of intelligence, and the community is very strong. We have about 4,000 members, and these are ex-people in the intelligence community, including the CIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, and the U.S. Department of State, which I was involved with recently until 2023 in the area of the Balkans, which was areas of Kosovo, Germany, Ukraine. So I have some insight on this information. And when I first started learning about possible terrorism back when I was in school at Harvard, and my professor, as well as my advisor, was the National Security Council chair for the White House, and also intelligence officer was another professor of mine. I got involved in the area of going to Naval Intelligence Reserve, and I was asked this question, and Iran happened to be one of the countries. Now I could disclose because it has been disclosed, but back about 30 years ago, in early 1990s or so, 35 years ago, they were already talking about the threat of Iran. And this is why people need to understand that we do have a lot of knowledge of what's going on, and we
few
do
days
have
ago,
strong intelligence community.
Cameras had entered.
So I just would like you to understand that the history is deep, and the information we have on how this war is going to end is still very questionable.
Right. And that's what people don't understand. I'm going to show this video up here. You know, we went and bombed their mountains, you know, and I don't know if you agree with this video. This video is supposed to be made by Iran a couple of years ago about their underground tunnel system. And we have to remember how they got funded. Obama sent them, I don't know how many millions of dollars, and President, oh man, Biden released funds that were held because of what they were doing. And that helps fund this project, what they were doing, and it helps fund all their proxies, which we have been attacked by their proxies. And it all started way back in 79. I'm going to show this. I won't probably show it all the way, but until I get to a point where it shows something that everybody needs to look at.
A few days ago, images were released of one of the largest underground missile cities belonging to the Aerospace Force of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC. Everything indicated that an official unveiling video would soon follow. Cameras had entered the tunnels. Senior commanders were present. Advanced ballistic missiles were lined up deep beneath the mountains. But the unveiling video was never broadcast. Why? According to reports, the release was halted due to security and military considerations. What was shown in the still images alone was already strategic enough to send a powerful message. And among all the missiles visible in those images, one stood out. For the first time ever, inside one of Iran's underground missile cities, a new missile was seen. The Khorramshahr 4, also known as K-Bar. And that changes everything. To understand the significance of this development, we must first understand Iran's underground missile city doctrine. Iran's underground missile cities form a core pillar of its long-term defense doctrine. This network of subterranean missile installations reflects decades of adaptation shaped by wartime experience and evolving threat perceptions. Since officially acknowledging these facilities in 2015, Iran has revealed a network of massive subterranean complexes carved deep into mountains across the country. These are not simple storage depots. They are fully operational underground military bases featuring long tunnel networks, missile storage chambers, assembly areas, command and...
Now, this is where I was going to stop it out. And Charlie, what do you think about that?
Well, going to that particular area, and that goes to my next phase that we're talking about, is the present. And as you know, we have already put attacks. We have several ships, over 20 ships in the area. We have 5,000 that's trying to train and help the troops on the ground in Iran. And we have also sent out thousands, over 3,000 now, of special force personnel that we have from the U.S. military. One of the reasons we're doing this is because, knowing from the past and even hearing from some of my colleagues in this field that is currently working on these projects, because the Association of Foreign Intelligence Officer writes proposals, at least a couple, to the president and our national security agencies as former or current members of the intelligence community. And what I can disclose is facts that we may already have told, but I'll repeat it. The thing is that with Ukrainium, the area is that plutonium and Ukrainium are the two main things, uranium, I'm sorry, that are the two main things that are able to produce bombs. Having some expertise in the back since the 90s with even North Korea, one of the things people don't understand, uranium that they have is actually so much more powerful. It's thousands of times more powerful than plutonium. You need about 20% to be able to make a bomb, the high energy uranium, so-called the HEU. And they have over 60% when we actually had struck them and the executive order by President Trump was given. So they are a threat. However, did they have missiles per se to be able to attack the United States immediately? We weren't sure about that, but now that we have new information, we have found that they have missile strikes capable of about 4,000 kilometers, which means every European nation, including all the nations pretty much in NATO, can be struck by Iran. Now, were they going to shoot the missiles? We don't know. But were they a threat? Yes, they were. This becomes the question of a modern time. Was it necessary for us to attack? Well, under the circumstances, some people believed it was, some people believed it wasn't. Well, my particular stance is that if we didn't strike probably within the next 10 years or so, they would have full capability and they have potential missiles. If not now, but by then they would be able to strike U.S. Areas, such as even in the area of California and maybe far as Washington, D.C. So the point is that we took a stance to say that they are a threat. Are they an immediate threat? That's where the dispute comes. And this becomes a question where you have people who are defending the side that we needed to do something while we had the opportunity. And then we have the other people who say, no, we didn't have to strike. And that becomes an issue, so-called the laws of, you could say the laws of wars. The proper name of it is international humanitarian law. I studied the areas of international law, and I do have some background in this area, even though it's not my specialty. I do have insight, and I have worked with the United Nations, and this is under like the Geneva, the United Nations, the Hague charters, and the other one, as we know, is the Nuremberg with the Holocaust principles.
Now,
so this is why they're challenging about Trump of possibly being in violation of war crimes. But this becomes, as I state here, I'm only here more for expertise and information than to give my own opinion. But they were a possible threat, and that becomes your own particular opinion if we should have struck or we shouldn't.
Exactly. Now, you first started, you said we already had 5,000 troops on the ground.
We have 5,000 that's already there, but another 3,000 has came in recently to be able to be special forces. Specifically, it's actually the 82nd Airborne. And the Airborne does a lot of special operations, which means that we have people there in reconnaissance as well as people who can defend certain areas. For example, we've already been told that they have the capability to control the straits, the Hormuz. And that, of course, has become a big international issue because of so-called, that comes to our future and part of our present, our gas prices. Well, when you don't have ships going through the little peninsula strait area, which is like the Panama Canal kind of concept, they have to go all the way around the continent, which makes it very difficult and more pricey. And it takes more time. And that means more time in the ocean also could mean more harm's way and piracy, as well as weather conditions. So it is a vital factor to be able to have that capability of those straits. That's one of the reasons, as you know tonight, the command of striking the areas to cripple even more than they were already damaged Iran is because the Straits has become an international issue for several countries. And we even have, and some people are arguing, we have taken off the sanctions of selling oil with the things of Russia. I think it's very important. People need to understand this presence. The oil situation that you hear that they're saying, why did they open up the oil and give more money capability to Iran? Well, the thing you have to understand is two parts. One, that oil was already issued out, and that's something that's already in the market. So the thing is, we can't stop that oil from being sold. What President Trump and the administration has done that's very smart is that even with the State Department talking to people, because I still get involved in that area of the intelligence community, is that we are going to sell, I mean, they're going to sell that oil. The question is someone like Russia who's brokering it going to make more money for the Iranians because it's Iranian oil? So take it as a concept that if I have the oil under my possession, but you're the one who sold it to me, I got to give you your portion. If the oil prices go up, you make more money. So it might be better for us to allow that oil to be sold now where the prices are still below of what the optimal, because as you heard, it could go up to $150 to $200 a barrel. It's already over 100. So the question is, do you want to give more money to the Iranians, or do you want to cut them at what the possibility is right now? And they have already the oil out there, so we can't stop it from being sold, but we could actually possibly lessen their profit. And a lot of people don't understand that, saying, why are you letting the oil out there? Because it's already on the market, and we're not going to go after places like Russia, China, or these other so-called brokers and start problems with them. So if they're going to sell it as a broker middleman, it's better to let them sell it now at a lower price than to actually allow the gas oil prices to go up more, and then it costs more. Now, the situation with the Straits is liquefied gas is a different kind of gas that comes in, LNG. And the thing is that when that actually comes out, we need to be able to understand that there's more oil resources and capability. And there is other goods that are coming through Iran that people don't understand. We have to remember, Iran is a pretty large country. It's approximately about 650,000 square miles. And the thing is that it's a big country. Even though we're much bigger, we have about 1.3, 1.4 million square miles just to take the capacity. You have to understand, even though we might be much bigger to a sense, it does not mean that their resources aren't valuable. So this is why it's an important cause right now. And when they have plutonium and they have certain issues, we are trying to defend our nation as well as other nations. However, did we have to go in? That's a question mark. But do we need to take more control of what's going on and having troops in the vicinity? Possibly, but the big question is, are we starting something that we can't finish? Because we don't have exactly an ending for this. And just to leave on the note, people need to understand the military has been crippled in Iran. The so-called, they have an armed force area, which is their ground troops. That's been still alive, but it is not in full force. They have so-called their Air Force, which is their aerospace force, and that has been crippled, but they never had the high technology and capability of our fighters, such as the F-16 Hornets or the F-35 or the MC-130, 135 planes that are large that you heard that were shot down recently for the rescue. And that was an excellent mission because there could have been more loss, but they were very smart making decoys of 7 different locations to fool, you could say, Iran, and they don't have the sophistication to be able to decode what we were doing exactly. They also have 3 other parts with their military that's important. The other one is their Navy. As we know, we've crippled them, and we have the strongest naval force in that area right now. And the 2 other are very key, because why I say this is, one is the area of the Quad. The Quad is really controlled by the IRGC, which is their main terrorism source. And people don't always know the Quad is very well funded. They may have a maximum about 21,000 personnel there, and also some of them are areas who are field operators, and they are capable of having strong fights. The 21 million, or actually it's up to 25 million that they have under the IRGC. So they have an armed force, but they don't have the so-called air nor the sea capacity to fight against us, which means we might need boots on the ground. That's where the soldiers are being put in right now. But if it starts getting messy, as they say, the problem is it's not going to be a simple fight, because as we learned from Iraq, which was also supported by Iran, and that comes to your funding, and I'll answer that just in a few seconds because I want to get to the last point. The last point is that not only the Quad that has more of the field ground, there's an intelligence force that a lot of people don't know that I've been studying for a period of time, since even back when I was getting commissioned through the process with naval intelligence in the 90s. It is actually called the Bazin. And they particular area is very strong with the current leader, Mobaz Khomeini, who's the son of the person who died, Ali Khomeini, has taken over as the third person of the supreme leader of Iran, so-called Ayatollah. And he was involved for a couple of years in the 80s. I believe it was like 87 to 89 with the IRGC. However, he's been involved and he had control since now for over 10 years of the Bajis. And they are the intelligence community. They have three main sources that they work with: a regular kind of area, and that's like students, sometimes workers. So they're more of the regular kind of intel and sources of supporters for the Islamic regime. The second area is active. Those people are more involved with the active duties, what's going on. They might be employees. They might be even areas that work with the government. And then the last one is the key part that you've been talking about, the funding as well, is the part they call it the special operations. And they are involved in the area with the IRGC. They're the ones who get involved, like Hamas, the people that we know with the Palestinian Islamic areas of the jihads, Syria, Iraq forces, the other area that we have that's been involved, Afghanistan. That terrorism comes out of that particular ends with the Quad and support of intelligence with the Bajis. So that's very important to understand right now.
I want to bring something up. He has agreed to delay his timing for tonight, and this is what it shows. Based on the conversation with Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Field Marshal Munar of Pakistan, and wherein they requested that I hold off the destructive force being sent tonight to Iran, and subject to the Islamic Republic of Iran agreeing to the complete, immediate, and safe opening of the Strait of Hormuz. I agree to suspend the bombing of attack on Iran for a period of 2 weeks. This will be double-sided ceasefire. The reason for doing so is that we have already met and exceeded all military objectives and are very far along with a definitive agreement concerning long-term peace with Iran and peace in the Middle East. We received a 10-point proposal from Iran and believe it is a workable basis on which to negotiate. Almost all of the various points of past contention have been agreed to between the U.S. and Iran, but a 2-week period will allow the agreement to be finalized and consummated. On behalf of the United States, I'm American president and also represents the countries in the Middle East. It is an honor to have this long-term problem close to resolution. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. And what do you think about that?
I had some insight, and I'm glad this is disclosed because I could elaborate on this. I think it was a good move. And the reason I state that is for two reasons. One is that Donald Trump our president, has set the Secretary of War and even the thing with Secretary of State Rubio, we do not want to be in a war. It's not in our best interest. And we don't need to start having disputes with so-called allies of Iran, such as Russia and China. And Russia has a lot more going on also, as you know, with Ukraine. So this is something that a lot of countries don't want to be involved. As you might have heard recently, the thing, I think there was disclosure this week, but I knew about it a few weeks back. The question of NATO as well, which I worked upon, and I was in 2023 with the areas of the military and international security as an officer. And then the other thing is that other United Nations and certain countries, including Japan, Australia, South Korea, they do not want to get involved because they don't see this as a war that they should be involved with. And what had happened, some people are viewing as belligerency, as they say, again, under that area of the laws of war for international, stating that we are being so-called bullies. But it's not really always bullying, but we are taking initiative that might not be necessary. So I think it's smart that the president has held off. However, the question comes into play now. Is he really being serious about stopping Iran? And his threats may not be taken as seriously because it seems like a bluff. Now, I don't think he's bluffing to attack because he can do it easily. And I believe our secretaries are willing to take the command and initiate because we have people there who could actually execute. And you usually don't do that if you're not serious. The point is because we have, as you know, boots on the ground, and there has been U.S. soldiers, 13, maybe even 15, that have already been killed. So this is becoming a serious issue. And the American people don't want that, I believe. And there's been polls saying that President Trump's rating has gone lower than anything. And it's probably because of this war and also the war's cause of inflation and certain effects and the problem of the tariffs not being fully enforced because of certain judgments stating that he does not have the right to set tariffs that's extreme. Right now we have, I think, 15% across the board and maybe some lower with our allies. But the key point is that the American people are feeling it in their pockets, so-called. And it's very important that we understand that Americans are taking the suffering right now, and they don't want this. So I think that's another good reason that he is not taking initiative for a belligerent stance and trying to find some way to have diplomacy. But again, we have to be careful because just as a lot of countries that want nuclear weapons, such as North Korea, we're at a stance where they're trying to protect their own country. Iran might be saying they're willing to do something, but as you know in history, even with the inspections under the International Atomic Agency, they would not allow us to check, and they had 60% of high energy uranium that allowed them to be able to produce bombs. And this is the problem, that can we trust them? But it is always smarter to try to work something out, that especially when other countries don't want to support nor get involved, because else we're going to have a war with Israel and the United States pretty much going on their own to go against Iran. And Iran's a big country, it has 92 million people. And they do have sources, as I explained to you, with capability of fighting back with so-called troops. They're paramilitary, but still 25 million is a lot of them. And they have an intelligence force that's at least 20,000 plus. So it won't be an easy fight. And it doesn't seem that we should get involved with something when we don't have a clear plan for exit. It could be so-called, as you hear, another Vietnamese or Afghanistan situation. And that's something that we strongly want to avoid as the United States.
Now, do you think who we're talking to with this ceasefire are the trustworthy? And kind of, because I know Pakistan's involved with it, but is it trustworthy to who we're talking to really believe what they're going to say? Because we know for years Iran says one thing and they turn around and do the opposite.
That is the key question that a lot of people have in the intelligence community. Do we actually know who we need to speak to? It seems that the person who is now the son of Ali Khomeini, who is Mosbah Husseini Khomeini, he's the third supreme leader of Iran, and he was set up by the assembly. So-called Iran they have a dictatorship, but they also have a parliament system where they do have a selection of their leaders because it's still kind of religious as clerical. And just to give you a little history, his background was involved of being a person with so-called, it was a Qam theology area of the seminary, and he was educated to be a cleric. But he does have more of a, you could say, well-rounded upbringing because his father and his family members were always in the higher echelon. And they believe he is the one that is calling pretty much all the decision at this point. But we're not sure of that. Why I say this is because of under Quad, the area that has the main force and the field force of these terrorist attacks, they have a leader, a general, who supposedly, Kwani, he doesn't seem to be getting involved as much, and he disappears at times, and he's supposed to be running that operation, and that is the terrorist force. They're the ones who help the Hamas, they help the jihads, and they've even been involved with Iraq, Syria, and Afghanistan terrorism. There's even question, as in the past you might have heard, the two forces that I'm saying, the Quad and Baji, and the Baji, you should know, is strongly supported and has been controlled, as I stated, by this current leader. And this is why a lot of people think that he has most of the say of what's going on. Now, these 10 points, if they are going to be something that's going to work properly, we are going to have to monitor as well as make sure that it's public so the people know, not only the American people, but the world citizen know that what the terms are, because they may back out or they may distort what they're saying. And it's very important that we hold them accountable. And one of the best ways to hold them accountable is by disclosing the information to others. And this is why, if we do have those 10 points and it does work to an area where we have some sort of agreement, I think it's very important that we have the United Nations, NATO, and other forces in that region that have influence to make sure that they abide. When I say they, I'm talking Iran, abide by the terms, but it also holds true for us. So it's one of those things that need to be done properly, and we have to be careful of what we commit to, because if they break the rules, so-called, or don't follow and breach the agreement, it doesn't mean that we're allowed to breach the agreement as well. But of course, if it's to defend our country, we have to do what's necessary. And that's why a lot of people don't understand that patriotism is not really just about a thing that you take an oath, which I've done as well. And for example, with my organization of the Association of Foreign Intelligence Officers, we've been trained, or at least had the proper experience of being able to have that decision saying, do we keep information and keep it confidential and we sacrifice ourselves, so-called giving our ultimate sacrifice of our lives to be able to save others? Or do we give up the information, then it's the greater good to disclose that information? Well, usually you don't give that information because it's not a decision that you make as a person who's an operative or a person who's in the position of taking orders. You have a time when you lead, you have a team when you follow. So what I believe is that if we go with those agreements and these people do make the 10 points, we don't know if they're going to abide by it because their leadership might not be keeping them accountable to those terms. Right
Well,
now,
then,
we think it's probably the son of Ali Khamenei who is controlling the country, but we really don't know who is the main person, and we need to
well,
find out.
isn't he one of the ones that's supposed to have been injured? I've heard he could be in a coma. Is that who you're talking about?
I can't fully disclose the information, but he was injured, but it was slight injuries. So you could
Okay.
kind of take to account if he's actually dead or not. But the one that is questionable, and you have to understand, this could be personal for him. People don't also understand this. In that bombing, not only his father, Ali Khamenei, who's the Ayatollah at the time, but his sister, and even more, his wife
Yes.
that he has children with died.
Yep.
So if you think that with their particular history and their honor of their country, it might not be something that he's just going to dismiss and say everything's fine,
Right.
that we have an agreement now. That's why I'm stating it's much more deeper than a lot of people think. And this is why I'm stating that you have to make that so-called evaluation, because I'm here just to give you the information and be able to give you insight. But in my particular perspective, it's something that becomes personal. It's not just saying
It
that
would be
this
just
is a
with me too. Yeah.
right.
Uh,
But now the quad,
now-
one thing I do want to state is the quad general who is under the Islamic Revolution Guard Corporation, so-called the IRGC, he was stated that he might be dead. But he also have been stated, and there has been facts on this, that he might have been in espionage, giving information to help Israel. So they don't know if he is actually still leading this terrorist group under the IRGC Special Forces. Now, the second in command, he is a General Falah. He is a person who might be more willing to follow the line of what they want to do right now. And another thing you should know, because of his teaching of the Islamic ideology, and when I say he, I'm talking about the current leader, he, as now the Ayatollah Khomeini, he is in a position where he is a very strong supporter of nuclear weapons. And he believes in the fact, especially controlling the intelligence Baji force of Iran. He wants to be able to strengthen their military and take more control of that region against Israel. That's where the threat's coming in. So if he's the one who's actually making the decisions, we are going to have a strong adversary in that region than before, because he's younger and he seems to be more entrenched to the Islamic Iranian ideology of a strong Allah.
Well, now, you know, the Crown Prince of Iran, he spoke at CPAC a week and a half ago. And people don't realize there's people that have been murdered over there from their own regime. And I'm going to bring up a clip of what he talked about the murders and see what you think about that one, on what he said about the massacres.
On January 8th at 8 o'clock, they took their lives in their own hands and took to the streets to fight against the occupying regime. At that exact moment, Khamenei, Larijani, Ghalibaf, and the rest of their mafia shut off the internet. Under the cover of darkness and with a depravity that shocked the world, they massacred more than 40,000 Iranians and injured over 300,000. they did not stop their terror on the streets. Wounded protesters were hunted down in hospital beds and shot in cold blood. Men and women were raped in secret prisons. Even nurses, ambulance medics, and doctors who dared to help protesters were tortured, raped, and killed. Families were forced to search through thousands of unmarked body bags, and the regime even charged grieving parents for the bullets used to kill their own children. To this day, mothers still search for their sons, and daughters still ask where their fathers will come home. To this day, 29 days to be exact, Iranians have been cut off from the world with almost no access to the internet. Fearful of my courageous compatriots, Khamenei Jr. and his cabal of criminals have dragged Iran from the 21st century to the dark ages.
Real quick, before you say anything, this is my input into it. How can we trust any regime or the IRG that does that to their own people, that protest to try to have a normal life like they used to have with Western cultures? How can we ever trust anything like that?
Well, you can't trust when you have different ideologies in this sense. And that goes back to our history part. The Persians have always had controversy, as you may know, with even Rome, the Catholics and the Christian faith. And it goes way back to that period of the Roman times and the falling of Rome, as well as the Persians who had control of that region before the Romans started becoming influential. To move towards more modern times, as we were talking, when Iran ended up getting their so-called current leadership with Ayatollah Ruhollah. He was the first and the founder of the so-called IRGC. And that particular situation is in 1979 that you were talking about, and it was really implemented official in 1980. And if you remember that time, I remember the Carter eras, and there was those long gas lines because Saudi Arabia and certain issues was, again, the oil issue, and maybe they were exaggerating to make some extra profits, but still, it became a world crisis. Well, currently, as you see at oil pumps in Illinois, we already have over $5,000 per gallon price. They say that even in the West Coast, some of the highest prices, like San Francisco and so on, they're going for as much as something like $8 or something. So it is hurting Americans in an indirect manner, and now it's becoming more direct. And one of the things we need to understand is that they have most likely people already in our country, as well as other adversaries that we have, are in our country to make problems for us, so-called protests, demonstrations, hacking, as you know, even with the problems that we had with Russia and other countries on our election integrity. So it's not something that's far-fetched, and we've done it for years, and we also are involved with things across the ocean with our adversaries. But the thing that we have to be wise enough to understand is if we do the same thing and keep trusting them, we're just being foolish. And that's why I think the president's stance to Iran is valid. However, the question is, how do you go about it? And that's what a lot of people are challenging, saying maybe we're not going about it the right way, and we may get involved in a situation that we can't just walk away from. And it's kind of proving that already with the international forum where we have the United Nations, NATO, and I stated even countries in East Asia, such as Japan, Korea, and Australia, are saying we're not getting involved because this is something that could last and not really something we want to be involved with. So even if we don't trust them, we have to understand that there's certain things that we have to compromise to be able to work. Now, should we be foolish and allow them to infiltrate in our country or be able to do things to hurt us overseas in harm's way? No, I don't believe so. And maybe I'm a little biased because of my background of working with the US government, as well as being in a democracy all my life. So my point is, it's not always the best view to say that our way is only right. However, our country and our ideology needs to be protected. So when you have someone like this person, the Crown Prince, speaking, and it's true, one thing that I want to note that people may have forgot, which you and I have lived through, during that period of the 80s, as you know, and that 70s and 80s, and even later on, as you might have remember the Iranian hostage crisis with the US embassies?
Yes.
They held our people up, 66 people who are just innocent people, Americans, and they held them. And I think it was like 50 something, maybe 52, that actually was left there for 444 days. And if you keep trusting people like this might be a problem, because they've already set standards that they are not looking out for our interest. And if you believe them, we're just putting ourselves in harm's way and being foolish. That's why what you were saying with Biden's case, when the release came, it was one of the worst traits that I've ever seen in negotiations for diplomacy. And I studied this for since the 80s and 90s. So, I mean, I was very infused in the 90s, even working with the president's office, as well as areas in the embassy overseas in Korea and East Asia. The thing is, you do not negotiate with terrorists at times. People even learn that when you're having hostages in local police departments, because if you give them what they want, they know they got something to bargain with. And that was one of the biggest mistakes I think Biden made in his administration, more for a publicity stunt, where we got a basketball player and they got 5 people or more, and even people who are key terrorists, and $5 billion that were escrowed in Korea, where the capability of that $5 billion probably went towards starting a war. Because why that money went to Iran, and Iran, as I stated, are some of the largest funders of Hamas.
Terrorism.
Exactly. So it's stupid to sit there and say that they aren't going to do certain harm, even if they're not. Why give them the bullets to shoot us,
to do
or
it.
shoot someone else that are our allies?
I'm going to show this video. I showed it earlier before Charlie came on, and this is sort of piggybacking on what he just said, and starting out with the hostages in 79, and they were held for 444 days. They were not released until Ronald Reagan was sworn in. And here's this video. And like I said, I showed it earlier.
The history of Iran's war of terror against America. There will be Americans that say, well, why did we do this? Listen up. The arranged war against America began in 1979 with the seizure of the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, where 52 Americans were held hostage for 444 days. President Jimmy Carter took no action. The day Ronald Reagan took office, the 144 hostages were instantly released. Why? Because Iran was certain Ronald Reagan was going to take action. The tale of terror continues. In 1983, Iran bombed the U.S. Embassy in Beirut and killed 63 people. Nothing was done, and America took no action. In October 1983, Iran bombed the U.S. Marine barracks, killing 241 U.S. Marines. At this time, this was the deadliest attack against the U.S. Marines since World War II and the Battle of Iwo Jima. America took no action. And then there was the Cobor Tower bombing in June 23 of 1996, killing 19 U.S. Air Force personnel and injuring 500 others. America took no action. America remembers the attack in New York City in 9/11 when 3,000 Americans were killed by terrorists flying a jet aircraft into the towers in New York. It took us 10 years to find Osama bin Laden. On October the 7th, 2023, the Iran-backed terrorist Hamas launched an unprecedented massacre against Israel, killing 1,200 people and taking over 250 hostages. Most of them were starved to death in the tunnels. The point is, history proves that Iran will murder and rape and murder and rape countless people until they are stopped by force. Other presidents did not have that courage. Donald Trump has that courage, thank God.
This piggies back to what you said, and we've had issues with Iran for a long time. And like that video said, we did nothing about it. And they just got stronger and stronger. Then you look at that video about their missile bases underneath, where it's not just missiles being there. They have troops in those bases, okay? It's like a military installation in the mountains. And to think that they said that was for their defense, there's no way that was for the defense, because they've been planning this for a long time. Look what happened when Trump did start the bombing. Who do they go after? Their friendly neighbors, Saudi Arabia, all of that, the Qatar. So they would reach out to anybody in a heartbeat to meet their agenda to destroy America, just like they've been saying for years, and Israel. This is my stance on it. And they do need to be stopped. And yeah, the whole world is paying a price right now, because it increased everything. But is it temporary? Here you have to look at the island, Karga Island. Or could we take that over and control that? I mean, it's because we do not get a lot of our product from Iran. Who's hurting and what's causing up and driving up the prices is that the oil that Europe uses and all the other one got a lot of it from Iran. We didn't get it. We got maybe not even 10%, 7%, if that. I don't think hardly any at all. So, yeah, that's why the prices go up, because there's less oil in the market. But I think and NATO needs to get involved, because you found out they launched a missile 2,200 kilometers, more than what we thought it went into the island of it's a military island. Can't think of it here. About a week and a half ago. So their missiles gone further. It's not about defense. This is about offensive and wanting to put a hurt in this whole world.
Well, I agree with certain stance. One thing to clarify, the Iranians have been shooting missiles in territories of other countries, such as Kuwait. The thing that we had been struck with, like USOs in various places, but they are US facilities, it seems to be. But yes, they're also injuring people in that country. Saudi Arabia, these centers, they're getting hit, but the target is US facilities mainly. So that's how these so-called people who, or you could say other countries that are in the proximity getting shot at. And they're trying to clarify that. But again, it's not justifying always, because when you shoot in their country, you are encroaching on that country. Even if you say that you're going with the U.S., it's like the U.S. is protected under the umbrella of Kuwait at the time, or Saudi Arabia. But Iran is not taking that to account, saying that we're not shooting at you, Kuwait or Saudi Arabia, we're shooting at the Americans. But it seems that their nationalists in their own countries are being injured and their infrastructure is being destroyed. So you can't justify that you're not hurting the countries that you're bombing, even though your target is Americans. And this
Well,
is why, as you know,
in
right,
Saudi
as you know,
Arabia,
with right,
they bombed a hotel in Saudi
right,
Arabia. I mean, they
yeah,
don't just
innocence,
target military bases. It's
right,
just like them shooting missiles into Israel. They're not
right,
targeting military. They're targeting civilians. Where at
right.
least I have to say one thing with the United States, we tried not to target or give collateral damage to the civilian area. I mean, yeah, you may have some, but what Iran is doing, I mean, they've done it for years. How many years have we shooting missiles to Israel? And it's not military installations, it's friggin' civilian populations. If you're going to go after military people, go after the military, not after the civilians.
Well, that goes back to the area of the laws of war and international humanitarian laws. The thing is that that's why I think what the president did this evening was a smart decision, because if we do go after their certain area of, you could say, facilities, their utility uh, plants, it can cause harm to civilians. But
Exactly.
yes, that's one of the things to strike to cripple them. But Iran, again, still has capability, especially ground forces. And if we're really going to, you could say, disable them with any kind of attack, we're probably going to have to go in. But if we're able to settle it and have them monitored and have the other countries in the world watching them, I think that would be smarter at the time being, because their capability now for nuclear weapons have been greatly delayed and they aren't as big as a threat as they were. But if we go with ground forces, it can become an issue where it's their territory. And we just had recent example, as you know, with Iraq, that we thought wasn't going to be so bad, or going after Saddam Hussein, and it turned
That was a
into
mistake.
years. Well, that's what I'm saying. Do we really want to test the theory again? And that's why it would be better to try to solve this without having some sort of conventional war on the ground.
Right. But see, the thing is, you referred to all the different, the Shiites and all that. And I said it a long time ago. Saddam Hussein was cruel and rude. Okay. But he had all those factions in check. Once we got rid of him, we opened up a can of worms. And if you look what's happened ever since Saddam Hussein, what's been happening with terrorism in that region. So we opened up a can of worms after taking Hussein off. But a lot of people don't realize, and I don't know if you probably behind me, you know it too. The reason Saddam Hussein got into power is because we used him, and I hate to say it, we used him to fight Iran. Am I right on that?
Yes, he was actually trained by our government to
Right.
be able to be a person of clandestine, as well as capability of being so-called an asset for our intelligence community. And that's one of the reasons it was so difficult to be able to fight against him, because he actually had training to be able to
Right.
go against us with the tactics we're using. And he made it a holy war, which is the same case at this point, because this current Ayatollah comes from the bloodline area that they're saying that has more of the divine right, because there's so-called two different kind of Muslim stance, as you may know, the Shiites and the Sunnis. And
Right.
one believes that it is allowed to have someone elected and appointed, where the other one believes it comes from the bloodline of the royalty. Exactly. But either way you put it, we have people who are allies at times, but again, if it comes to the ideology, it's still a conflict. So this goes back to the part of the Romans and the Persian days where there was fights. And as you probably know, there's movies out there that has examples of these kind of clashes. And this is why it's very difficult to say that, well, we're going to agree on agreement, so let's stick to it. And we've learned, especially I have personally in real experiences, it doesn't always keep to what people say they're going to do. So that kind of statement that you hear, like in Jerry Maguire saying, my word is strong as oak, well, you're going to have to find something stronger than oak at times because it becomes a bigger issue.
All right. Now, see, this takes me back to Vietnam. Now, you said a ground war. The only thing now, Iran has no air superiority in the air at all. Okay. We have all the air superiority over Iran. You have your C-130 gunships, and you have your Apache helicopters. I mean, how can Iran's IRG say they attack our troops or try to? How can they withstand that type of pounding by our air capability?
Well, that's what we also thought in Iraq. And they have these caves and mountains, just like what happened with Vietnam. They had their jungle areas and their pits and areas to hide. So I've learned to never underestimate adversaries, because the reason is when you start doing that, you're the one who actually ends up finding out something you don't want to know. So
Okay.
that's why I think it's better to stay out of a fight if we can, because if we put so-called boots on the ground and troops are there, which we even have at this point, but they are special operations and they're highly trained. And the thing is, it's usually a higher ratio, even if it's 1-2, 1-4 or higher, where we have more force. That still means that some will die. We've already had
Right.
a handful of soldiers die there. And like you say, yes, something like we have superior air power. The F-35, that's the most modern kind of plane in our area. Only thing is the sleep planes that we have, the Celts that we haven't really always issued out there, but it's not appropriate. We have drones, but they have these capabilities too with drones, and they still have MiGs, and they have planes that are like, as you might have heard, the F-14, F-15s, they're no comparison because it's generations behind. However, they were able to take down a F-15. So you can't underestimate them. Even if we lose a handful of lives, it's still too many that we didn't have to. And that's why
Right.
I'm kind of against of any kind of, you could say, belligerence to provoke a war on the ground. And then we have to go by conventional rules. That means that we have certain limitations of what we can and can't do by the areas of our so-called laws from the Geneva and Hague conventions.
You mean
So
something like,
I'm really against going into war, but if we have to, we do. And fortunately, we have some of the best trained as well as the greatest technology in the source for military. So I don't think we'll lose, but the question is at what sacrifice?
what cost? Yeah, I agree.
Exactly.
Because yeah, I mean, you look at, and they know their terrain, but it's just sad that it's came out of this because they could never negotiate in true faith before Trump actually started really bombing. I mean, before he actually started decapitating their top leadership, they would not negotiate, or then did not negotiate in fairness. And with what we've been through for 47 years, yeah, I mean, I don't believe the wording that Trump used to put him in the Stone Age. I don't agree with that either, because they're still human beings, and you still have the people that have common sense over there, but the ones that common sense, they're the ones that's trying to protest, and they're ones getting killed. I heard we did send some arms over to the Iranian people, but some of those arms got into the hands of the Kurds, and they're not even wanting the Kurds to come in to the area because I guess they have different probably thoughts and why they want to do it.
Yes, and that is some of the problems, just to address what you're saying with the protesters. It even goes back when one of the biggest protests was the Green movement that they had in Iran. And it's very similar now. There is people who are praising that the Ayatollah is dead, but now they have an Ayatollah who's the son, and he happens to be even a stronger supporter for hardline Iranian Islamic values. So actually, it might be worse. And he has been taking stance. There's been hundreds of protesters in various places adding up. I mean, they came from areas of like 100 to 200 at times where they've been arrested or killed. As you heard, they're being set as examples of being beaten on the streets just to set an example to frighten the other citizens who are trying to uprise against the current leadership. So again, this is not something that I personally think is a good idea, knowing from the Korean history, living with post-Korean War and then coming during the Vietnam War to the United States from South Korea and experiencing the certain areas of that you could say sacrifice that's been made by so many. But again, it's the people as well as the American people that may suffer. And to me, that is not a venue that I always set as an option unless there is no other option available. But then
Yeah.
if we're going in, we got to go in 100%. You do not play
100%,
this
get it
half
short
game.
as
Yeah,
possible and get out there. Right.
exactly. And get
Uh,
it done and get out.
I want to get ready to close on one thing. And what it is about, we have our protests here in the United States. You know what? You better be lucky and thankful you're in the United States and you're not in Iran, like a country like that, where you've seen the videos. I've seen a video and I didn't bring it to where there's body bags after they wiped out the internet and they just turned around and murdered 30, 40,000 people. How many hundreds of thousands probably injured. So you know what? You look at Trump as a king. Well, kings do not put up with that. And that's basically what's going on in Iran. They're basically a king and they will murder you for protesting. They will not hesitate. It's their own people. They will not hesitate. So if you're an American citizen, saddle up, become an American citizen. Your right to protest is there. You go to that country, some other countries, you don't have that right to protest. So, keep that in mind when you have these No Kings protests. Go over to Iran, try your protesting against their government, see what happens. Charlie, you want to end on that?
I agree with what you're saying. And as you know, we've been entitled, like the Roman Empire, of like the fourth generation, where we still think we're first citizens and that we are privileged to have something, but we think we're entitled instead of having it as a privilege. And I think it's very important, as you have implied, that we have to understand democracy is something that has to be earned. It's not free.
No, it's not free.